My name is Amy Natt. I am the CEO of Aging Outreach Services, and this is All Things Aging.
And I'm Amy Obst, editor of Outreach NC, our monthly publication. And today we're talking about how to avoid a crisis and how to plan ahead of time so that you can avoid a crisis if possible, but
Have a better outcome.
Have a better outcome.
Yes.
All right. Why do people tend to avoid planning for a crisis?
So I think it's human nature, right? That if we acknowledge that there's a problem or something that's not going right, then it forces us to make a change. And so I think that a lot of times it's easier to pretend that something's not happening so that you can just sort of carry on life as normal. We're kind of creatures of habit, and I think we tend to resist change. And so people tend to not think about changing needs or address those needs sometimes until they're really kind of faced with that crisis. It's hard to ask for help, especially for an older adult, because that can lead to a host of other things down the road, a loss of independence, the need for more assistance. And so I think there's a reluctance to ask for help when it seems like something small or trivial, but then it sort of adds up and becomes a crisis.
So that's interesting, because when you say crisis, my mind immediately goes to something out of the blue that's blindsiding you.
Right.
But it could be something that started as a manageable issue and becomes a crisis through lack of action.
Definitely. It could be something that's sort of built up a little bit at a time and you think that you can handle it, but then it sort of goes on until it becomes a crisis.
What's an example of something that happens that way?
If you think about people who want to stay in their home, right? So in order to stay in their home, they need to be able to demonstrate that they're managing being in their home, they're cooking, they're cleaning, their yard work, and so forth. And so giving up any one of those things can be the next stepping stone to change, which can be the next stepping stone to feeling like you're going to have to leave your home. And so people tend to let the yard go, the housekeeping go, they start eating frozen meals instead of cooking, just all these little things over time. But then eventually it gets to a crisis point where they really cannot manage it. Where if they had planned ahead and added support a little bit along the way, they might have avoided getting to a crisis point in the first place. That's a good example.
Okay. What does decision making during a crisis look like?
So if you think about the last time you had a crisis in your own life, people tend to react more emotionally. And so if you're making emotional decisions, then a lot of times you're not thinking as logically about things. If you are making a decision in a crisis, you might be focused just on the immediate needs. So you're not really thinking, well, what comes after this decision? You're really just focused on the crisis in the minute, and you're making decisions based on sometimes limited information, maybe limited resources, or fewer options and choices than if you'd planned ahead. So it's a lot more immediate, it's a lot more emotional, and then sometimes there's kind of unintended consequences to those decisions when you're in crisis mode.
So it sounds like it's more reactive and less responsive.
Definitely, definitely.
So what can be done to avoid reaching a crisis point?
So definitely, we talk a lot on this podcast about communication, but that really is true. A lot of us, especially people that have lived sort of private lives and maybe they've had really clear boundaries in their family between adult and child, and so they haven't communicated information as far as what they would want as they get older, information about medically what's going on with them, information about financially what's going on with them, information about just things that they might not be able to do as easily as they used to. Maybe they had a little fender bender, but they didn't share that because they're afraid of somebody taking the keys. And so definitely the more information that you can share, the less likely you are to sort of end up in a crisis, because people will understand around you and be sort of looking for red flags. I think especially with aging, being able to embrace change and looking at both the immediate needs and those long-term needs can help a person sort of avoid getting to crisis point, and talking through scenarios, right? It's always good to talk about, well, what would happen if I had a fall? What would happen if I needed, if I had surgery and I wasn't going to be able to drive for 6 weeks, or I wasn't going to be able to cook? So sort of talking through some of those scenarios that you've seen happen to your friends, happen to other family members, what would you do in that situation, or what would you want in that situation? The more you've sort of talked about it, it doesn't seem so frightening or foreign when you find yourself in that scenario.
That's interesting. And you said for somebody who's been private or had really clear boundaries, I think you're going to have to start shifting the boundaries a little bit. And so maybe having your child come with you to a medical appointment would be a good way before a crisis to get used to having them involved in your care.
Definitely. And it's hard. Like if you've always maintained those boundaries, a lot of older adults will say, I don't want to burden my children with this information, or I don't want them to feel like they have to come help. And so they tend not to share information. And on the surface, mom or dad is doing great. And then all of a sudden you go to visit and you realize things really aren't so great. So, the more you sort of have that open communication, and you certainly can still keep some things private with still sort of, giving accurate updates on what's going on in your life.
I remember you telling me once, bring a housekeeper in so you can get used to having somebody in your house and trusting somebody and have that. I think the same is true, I guess, with our relationships with our children and our parents. Get used to the shifting way that those relationships change.
Yeah, it's sort of changing the nature of your conversations, and that can be difficult sometimes. And it shifts a change, like you said, in the relationship sometimes in the parent-child role, or maybe it's just a good friend, and one of you is aging at a different rate of the other, or maybe having different challenges. And so communicating and talking about those things can certainly give you a wider set of options and choices because you're talking about them.
I never thought of that. Like siblings, the older sister might have always been the decision maker, and she might get sick, and the younger sister has to step in. The roles change. Yeah. Can a crisis always be avoided?
Absolutely not. As a planner, right? I pride myself on great planning, no matter if it's for my own life, my children's life, a vacation, whatever it is. But even and I certainly run into older adult clients who have been very diligent in their planning. They've explored options. They visited different facilities. They know different meal services in the area, and they think they've really planned for the crisis, but an unexpected fall happens, or just something unexpected, a medical change, and they still find that they end up in a crisis. So 100% it cannot always be avoided.
Are there any benefits to experiencing a crisis?
Yeah, I mean, there are. It's one of those things, kind of make lemonade out of lemons, right? And so a crisis can certainly be a call to action. And, I see this a lot. There are some people who just refuse to accept the reality of their situation, and sometimes it takes that crisis, right? We hear this all the time. Somebody has maybe for years their doctor said, oh, your blood pressure is a little high, your cholesterol is a little high, and they sort of ignore it, but then all of a sudden there's a massive heart attack or something that is a wake-up call, right? It's a call to action, kind of a reality check, or a call for change. And so that can be positive. You also see there are times when it can build relationships.
Right.
When you're in a crisis, you find out really quick who's going to be there for you, right? It could be, a lot of people ask how they can help, but it's who shows up.
Right.
It may open a door between you and your adult child that wasn't there before, to reestablish a relationship and really figure out how to be there to support that parent. It could be friends, it could be church members, but you do tend to build relationships during crisis. And the other thing I would say is, and again, we probably see a lot of examples of this, but a lot of people really find their inner strength. Right. And this can be true of, say, the spouse that's the caregiver taking care of their husband who just had a stroke or has dementia. People tend to find their inner strength in these situations. And so I think that that can definitely be a positive to experiencing a crisis or going through that crisis.
I've had a lot of people tell me that through a crisis they felt a deeper sense of connection, meaning, purpose.
Yeah.
So even though it's difficult, they're engaged.
It's your second chance to do it again sometimes.
And I think people then lean on the fact that they've been successful at navigating one crisis, so they're not as afraid of the next possible
fear
issue.
out.
Yeah.
And they tend to then do some planning. Now, there certainly are people in my career who just go crisis to crisis. And so you want to avoid, but a crisis in itself can certainly be a way to kind of get a new inner strength and a new sense of purpose, and realize that life is short, and kind of take some steps to put things in place, build relationships or fix relationships sometimes, and kind of take care of business.
So what are those steps that they can take to plan ahead?
So we talked about in some of the other episodes that we've had, so I thought I would finally show it, and we certainly can link it and are happy to send this to anybody who would like a copy. But even, there are all kinds of planning guides out there. So if you're not sure where to start and you're not comfortable communicating your information, there are planning guides out there that will sort of walk you through the things that you should be thinking about and allow you a place to document information. And I tell people all the time, you can fill this out as detailed as you want. You don't have to share it till you're ready, right. But at least that information is there, so that you kind of, if somebody is stepping in to help you in a crisis, they know about you, who the key people are in your life, what bills they need to watch for, how you typically pay them, that type of thing. And so definitely planning guides are good. You also can do your estate planning and make sure that you've done, a lot of people say, oh, I've done my will. But that's for when you're gone. And so think about living documents, your healthcare power of attorney, your durable power of attorney, your living will that says what you would or would not want in a medical crisis. And so having those planning documents in place, not only for what will happen when you're gone, but what you want to happen while you're still there. And that opens up conversations, right, with people, because you're deciding who you would trust to make decisions for you if you couldn't. Knowing sort of who your care team is. With a lot of clients that I meet when they're very independent and they're on our on-call program, and I may see them quarterly just to touch base, and they're completely independent and managing on their own and don't need help right now, but we know through communication that when they do, I'm going to know enough about them to step in. And so you kind of have to have your care team. If you think about yourself at the middle of a spoke, like, who are all those support people around you? Is it your medical doctors, whoever your attorney that helped with your documents might be, your family, your church? If you have a financial planner, it's who are those people around you that are going to make up that team who's going to support you. You can host family meetings. There's no better way to throw everyone off at Thanksgiving than to let them know you'd like to have a family meeting to talk about some things. But definitely, communicating information ahead of time to those key stakeholders can make a big difference. And then the other thing I really like, and this may be because I'm a list maker, but making pros and cons list, right? If I stay in my home, these are the pros, these are the cons. If I move to the nice retirement community where several of my neighbors have gone, here's the pros, here's the cons to that. If I suddenly decide that I really shouldn't be driving anymore, here's the pros to that, here's the cons to that, right? And so really writing down things and looking at them logically can lead to good decision making.
Mm-hmm. That makes me want to make pros and cons.
I know, you should.
It's interesting because when we talk about conversation, we think about with somebody else, but this opens up a lot of the conversations you need to have with yourself, so that when a crisis happens and a doctor asks you, or a care manager asks you, you'll have thought of this before and you'll know. Yeah,
if you've never thought about it, you're going to be, it's fear, like we talked about, kind of deer in the headlights, and you're going to make a decision based on very limited information. Right. This is true, like the best example I can think of is when somebody ends up in the hospital and they're told that they cannot go home yet, they're going to need to go to a rehab facility. If they've never stepped foot in a rehab facility, it can be extremely frightening. If they've maybe only been to one and it was not a good experience, maybe they had a friend there they were visiting, it can be very frightening. But if they've visited several in the community, and they have a pretty good idea of, okay, well, here's 4 or 5 that I might be able to choose from. I visited a couple. This is my first choice. This is my second choice. That can be a lot more empowering when making those decisions that are kind of out of your control in that situation.
Yeah, I guess that your control really comes down to how much you've prepared and the capacity that you have, that window of tolerance.
I mean, you might not be able to control what's going on, like the medical change or the crisis, but you can certainly control some of the decisions and the input that you have for the next step. I think it's important.
What happens when your plans fall through?
Because it will, right? What is that? The best laid plans?
Yep.
Have a plan B, right? I think all of us have, and it can be a trap. If you only have one plan and you have super high expectations and this is your plan and it falls through, those people really can struggle, right? Because they feel like they've lost control. So have a plan B, have a plan C, because it's not always going to go the way that you think it might. And so it's really important to say, to be able to pivot, right? To be able to be flexible and understand that, okay, this is how I thought it was going to go as I got older, but my kids have moved away now, so that's not an option. I didn't want to leave my home, but I understand I'm not safe there. So my plan B was, if I had to go into a community, this is the one I really like the best. The more you have input into those decisions, the more you're going to adapt and the more it's going to feel acceptable to you to embrace that change versus feeling like you've lost control.
Right.
So plan B, plan C.
Okay. What are common speed bumps to planning ahead?
So I think especially when it comes to aging and challenges that people face as they get older, I think there are several. I think one of those is financial concerns. If I look at how much it might cost to have care in my home, or I look at how much it might cost to move to a retirement facility, I'm going to be frozen. I'm going to feel like, what if I can't afford that? So if I don't look, then I don't have to think about it. So they're definitely, the cost of doing things, the cost of doing your legal documents, the cost of increased care needs can be a speed bump to somebody, versus educating themselves on, okay, well, what does Medicare cover? Do I have a long-term care policy? Knowing those costs so you can budget for it and make decisions within your budget. Definitely lack of knowledge, like we talked about. There's great educational content in most communities through senior enrichment centers, Department of Aging's area agency on aging, those type of things, through companies that provide support and care. Go to those things. Learn about what resources are available before you need them, and what type of professionals are available to help before you need them. That's definitely a good way to overcome that lack of knowledge. Another big speed bump can be just isolation. As somebody gets older, there can be increased loneliness, there can be increased depression, especially if they've started to lose friends, if they've lost their spouse. And so just feeling kind of down sometimes can be a speed bump to making decisions for your future because you're just kind of stuck where you are now. Not communicating is a speed bump. You may have all the wishes documented, but you never told anybody. And I think one is updating your plan. I meet with people a lot that say, oh, I've done all of this. I was with a gentleman the other day and he had done all of his estate planning documents. It'd been about 10 years. And when we went in and looked at them, the financial institution that he had designated for his durable power of attorney was no longer in existence. And while he had done all his planning, when we went back and looked at the plan, that wasn't going to work anymore. And then when we really started going through his documents, there were some things, decisions in his living will, things he thought he wanted 10 years ago that now his situation and his mindset had changed. And so I think even if you have a plan, you need to revisit it periodically to make sure those people are still in your life. I've had, some people have listed people in their documents that maybe are deceased now or have some medical condition of their own. And so revisiting that plan and continuing to see if it makes sense with kind of how your life is now. And just follow through, right? How many people get to page one and then put it aside and then never come back to it? And I certainly have people that when we meet quarterly, I'm like, where are you? We've made a list of 10 things. Where are we at? We're on number 3. Okay, well, let's work on 4 and 5. It's like anything else in life, you need sort of consistent follow through in order to make that plan. And in this case, to try to avoid the crisis and kind of stay in control of what's going on in your life.
How often do you recommend looking at the plan and assessing it?
I mean, I think every 5 years, some of that is financial situation could have changed. There could be legal changes that impact how your documents are written, but your situation, how you feel about things, who's actively in your life, and kind of maybe you've moved, maybe you're in a different state now. I mean, there's all kinds of things that can change. And so kind of revisiting and talking through those plans at least every 5 years, I think is really important to do.
All right, let's put these into play with some common scenarios. Mom's hospitalized
Okay.
and unable to return home.
Okay, so if you think through, so I just went through this with my dad. Actually, he was hospitalized and needed to have quadruple bypass, and if that's not something, and could not return home, right? Went straight from hospital into a rehab facility before going home. And so, in those scenarios, again, if you've never stepped foot in or know how, even how Medicare works or how your insurance works, what it might cover, what it might not, what those facilities look like, what your expectations should be. If you've never looked at those in your area, then it can feel like, again, like you're stuck in this crisis mode, and it's confusing and it's fearful because you don't have enough knowledge and resources to make decisions. And so there's people in the hospital that are telling you things and making decisions, and you're just kind of going along with it because you don't know what else to do.
Okay, yeah. You have a stroke and are unable to communicate your wishes.
Right. We talk a lot about these living documents. There does come a time you can no longer, legally draft these documents. And so this is the type of thing you want to do prior to something that would make you unable to communicate, like a stroke. So it'd be very important to do these documents while you're cognitively able to and verbally able to, and this type of thing, to make your wishes known. But waiting until it's too late can result in guardianship situations and can lead to more of a crisis, for sure. Don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that.
At any age, don't do that, right? I have my documents in place.
Oh, yeah, I've seen people in their 50s have a massive stroke and not be able to communicate. Yeah, and it's not something that was ever on the radar.
Right.
You decide to move your dad in with you after your mom dies.
Right. We get this a lot, so it's a knee-jerk emotional reaction, right, of an adult child. Moving dad in, I'm going to take care of him. This is what mom would have wanted, and seems great, but what does dad want? One. Right. Two, do you have the space? Is your home conducive to this? Is there, maybe dad's in a walker. Well, do you have, doorways that can accommodate him? Do you have a bedroom, bathroom that can accommodate him? And again, how is this going to change the family dynamic? So while it seems like this is what I should do, and you're reacting because you're in a crisis, it may not be the best thing. And there are certainly situations where families do that and they realize a few months down the road, oh, we didn't really plan for this. Where if you had talked about it as a family and sort of planned for, is this something that you would want down the road to come and, live here? And maybe we built a nice little in-law suite to accommodate that. That's a much better scenario than making that decision in a crisis.
Well, I think people underestimate how disruptive that is to just rebuild your life in a new community, in a new place, and it can be very isolating, and depression can set in.
And the whole sandwich generation thing, right? If you're the older, the adult, you're taking care of a parent, and you're taking care of children as well. That's a whole nother topic, but right. So if you make a kind of a quick rash decision to move mom or dad in with you, maybe that is the right thing, maybe it's not, but certainly you don't want to be making that decision just based on emotion without really talking through it and planning for it.
Okay. Your adult children live out of state and you have a medical crisis and are admitted to the hospital.
So again, just dealt with this with my dad, and you really need, if your parent lives out of state, I think it's very important to have some professional there on the ground that you can communicate with, or even if it's if your parents, so my dad, for example, maybe it's somebody who's a good friend to him there that can communicate information to me. What is the name of the hospital? When we were dealing this, people were calling me and I was like, wait a minute, I don't even know the name of the hospital where he's at. I certainly don't know any resources. Let me find a professional in that area who can give me a really quick education. If your support network is out of state, then that's something you need to be planning for ahead of time. If you end up in a medical crisis, who are you? Who's going to bring you clothes? Who's going to help navigate the discharge? Who's going to be your advocate? Those are the type of things that you need to be thinking about ahead of time, so you're not in panic mode.
It's hard. When my cousin got sick, I didn't know. I just wasn't getting phone calls, text messages back. I didn't know
that she was sick.
She was sick. She was in the hospital, and then trying to find the hospital, and then could they even tell me anything because I am not on HIPAA list? And so it was a very complicated and stressful thing, I think, for everybody.
Yeah, it can be. I mean, even with my own parent, and I am on the list, he didn't call me until the doctor in the ICU said, oh, they told me I better call you. And I'm like, well, wait. And then I see his medical information when I get down there and I'm like, wait, there's been these other medical crises or hospitalizations or surgeries that you never told us about. I didn't want to bother you. So you see that a lot. So in our family, him having that medical crisis was the wake-up call to say, hey, we need a little more communication and we need to know what your wishes are, what you would want, so that we can help you do this. Because not only did we have the out-of-state and sort of the lack of communication, kind of it was a perfect storm of all of these things leading to the crisis. So a little planning helps.
All right, we'll do one more.
Okay.
You're sent from the hospital to an assisted living and told that you have to pay out of pocket.
Yeah, this is a common one. People go, oh, I have insurance. It's going to pay for it. They don't understand a lot of times that there are certain criteria. Medicare is for older people. Medicaid is for low-income people. Long-term care insurance is a specific policy someone might have taken out to cover types of care you might need. So there's all these little specific things, but a lot of people assume that their insurance is going to cover everything. And then they find out, well, hey, I can't go back home. I've got to go. I don't have anyone that can help me at home. I'm going to have to go to a step down or to an assisted living. And then they're told, well, this is going to cost you $6,000 a month or whatever the case may be. And they just assumed insurance would cover it. So that's that financial planning piece and understanding what your insurance will cover, what it won't cover, and sort of planning ahead financially. Like, this is my nest egg. What is going to be possible for me? What won't? What will make my resources stretch? And so that planning piece of finances of it is really important as well. You don't want to be caught off guard.
Now I want to know.
I have people that have been told they can't go home because they don't have support system at home, and they are sent to a facility, and they're paying that bill out of pocket, and that can be devastating to somebody's finances. Certainly somebody, if they are low income, could start the process of Medicaid or so forth, but those are long processes that sometimes require liquidating assets, or maybe you have funds, but they're all in a financial brokerage account and you don't have quick, easy access to them. So that's another thing, like, how would you access those funds if you suddenly needed them? And so all of a sudden you've got a lot of moving pieces, and it takes somebody to really help you sort through those. If it's just you and you're recovering from something and you're in this assisted living, and it can be really hard to then plan the next steps. So pull it together before then.
I've been making notes. I've been like, okay,
I know, pull it
this,
together before.
Yeah,
a little planning can go a long way. Certainly you can't avoid the crisis, but if you can at least try to embrace that change is going to happen, and there are decisions that need to be made, and start talking through and researching what those resources are going to be, it's going to give you a lot more peace of mind.
Great.
So,
thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.